listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. And today I am bringing you an interview with Michael Gilbert of Flotsam and Jetsam. Of course, Michael is one of the founding members of Flotsam and Jetsam. We had a terrific conversation, and I really look forward to bringing this interview to all of you. And of course, if you do want to support the show, please give this video a like. Hit the subscribe button if you want to subscribe to the channel. And of course, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. So with that said, here is the interview with myself and Michael Gilbert, the guitar player and one of the founding members of Flotsam and Jetsam. Here you go. Okay. Just got to hit consent.
We are good to go.
Okay. We'll start it off here then. Welcome back, everybody, to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Today I'm here with Michael Gilbert of Flotsam and Jetsam to talk about the brand new album, I Am the Weapon, and maybe a lot more about the band as well. So welcome to the show, Michael. First time I've ever had you on the show, but definitely really excited for this one.
Thanks, Tony. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about the record, the new record coming up with you, and I hope you've had a chance to listen to it, and definitely let's talk about it.
Well, if you ask Ken, he will tell you how much I love it.
Oh, okay.
We'll put it that way. Anyhow, so let's talk about I Am the Weapon. And I think the album is brilliant. And, you know, after I had talked to Ken and had him on the show, for me so far, this is the album of the year for me. And I have followed the band from their first album. And obviously, I followed the band all the way through their career in the 90s. Actually, the early 90s is when I got into you guys. And I really love these last three albums. But I Am the Weapon, for me, in my opinion, is the best record you guys have ever put out. And to that, you say what? Do you agree?
Yeah, it's definitely up there as one of my favorites that we've done. This one and the prior one, Blood in the Water, are probably my two favorites.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you know, I mean, we come across issues with it, you know, like, are we going to be able to release something as good as Blood in the Water, which was our previous one to this? And so that was the one scary thing that was going through our minds the whole time we were writing. And when we finally got AK doing the big choruses, because, you know, Ken and AK worked closely on the lyrics and the chorus lines and stuff for every song on the record. And the way it turned out when they were done, I just kind of was a little bit jaw dropping for me, and like something to really be proud of. I'm proud of my guys in my band, or our band. It's not my band, but it's our band. Super proud of them, and very grateful to still be relevant in this business after all these years, and to be working with these guys who I like and are ultra talented.
One of the things that Ken and I discussed on the show was, this is one of the few times, you know, everybody, when you would hear Flotsam and Jetsam over the years, if people really loved the album, you would hear, oh my God, this is the greatest album since No Place for Disgrace or Doomsday for the Deceiver. And a lot of bands run into that, where you run into that like nostalgia thing. And you guys have really overcome that, because when The End of Chaos came out, and I remember vividly when that record came out, a lot of people almost, it's not that they forgot the old stuff, but it wasn't referenced as much as, say, when another band comes out with an album. Oh, it's the best album since, you know, whatever record was really iconic by them. Like someone might, you know, you might have like a Metallica album come out, best album since the Black Album, or, you know, you get an Iron Maiden album comes out. People will say it's the best album since Seventh Son. You don't hear reviews of the Flotsam and Jetsam stuff saying that. I hear reviews of, wow, and this is what I said in my review. Basically, I said, wow, this band has really progressed into something, and nobody's really mentioning the old albums, even though they like them. You seem to have overcome that nostalgia. I call it like typecasting, right? You know, that's kind of the best way to put it. And do you see a lot of that with these last, say, three records?
Yeah, there's not a comparison. I don't think it's a totally different band in the personnel department, except for me and AK. so you're whenever you change players and you bring these players in as songwriters, you're obviously going to get a little bit of a different sound, and it's along with evolving over the years. This is what we came up with, and I think that the self-titled record, which was just prior to Into Chaos, is when we finally started going, okay, we've got like a really solid foundation for something here. Whereas before we toyed around with speed metal, and then we had some rock songs, we had metal songs. I mean, there's been a lot of variations of different types of music that we put on our records. That is good in some ways and bad in other ways. The bad way would be, a lot of metal fans are really true to the craft. They don't want to hear. I'm not saying they're all like this, but a lot of them don't want to hear anything outside that box. And so when you put something out that's not in the thrash genre, they end up just going, it's not thrash. It's more power metal now, so they don't want to listen to it, But since the self-titled, we've been able to accomplish the power metal genre and all kinds of these other metal genres, or even death metal. We're playing shows with these bands, and I think it's all attributed to the latest songwriting in the last 4 records, and
Right.
how it's all transpired on vinyl.
Yeah, for me, I think I talk about a progression. I still think, because I've followed the band for as long as for a very long time. In fact, the actual first album I ever heard from you guys was Drift, right? That sort of got me into the band. And then obviously I heard, everything before that. It feels like you have a lot of your thrash roots and just a little bit of power metal, especially in the choruses. It's like, that combination of songwriting, I think, with the End of Chaos on, you've put out 3 absolutely brilliant records. And what changed? Like, who was it, the person, or was it all of you that basically, when you went to start writing these songs, where did a lot of that come from? Because I've never heard, I've heard the band do a lot of different things over the years, but I've never heard it where you guys are just playing this crazy heavy thrash metal, and then you start adding in some more melodic stuff that you didn't really hear as much in the earlier material.
I think it's growth and maturity, along with a couple other ingredients. Like, we've got a drummer. You mentioned Ken Mary. He's a world-class producer, and having this dude in the band is like, I've said it in a couple other interviews. He's like having a Swiss Army knife in your band.
Yeah,
he does everything, and he not only does everything, but he's good at it. He's a really good record producer. He's the real deal, and he's a better drummer than he is a producer. Like, that guy is a freaking monster to play with. And so is Steve Conley. Steve Conley brings a different type of writing. He brings these big open choruses, whereas in prior years, this might have been one of my my weaker parts, is writing choruses, the music for the choruses. There's a lot of riffage going on during that, and you don't necessarily need a lot of riffage for the choruses, because you want your audience to hear the chorus, the big chorus, and get that caught in their brain. You want them to still be singing the song when the song's over. And I don't think that we hit that mark in some of the earlier records, but we are now. Yeah. And it makes a huge difference.
I would agree, because the band has either done albums that were super melodic, if you go back to Drift, as I brought up before, or just straight ahead thrash, say like the first album. And it's like you've combined that essence of those kind of styles of music into these last 3 records. Was Ken the kind of like the guy that when he came in, because he came in 3 albums ago, basically, was like somebody that really was kind of a catalyst for this?
Yes, but I didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
I was terrified when Bittner left, but he called me and said, look, I knew it was just weird. I could tell. And I go, what band is it? And he's like, how do you know what I'm going to say? I go, what band? And he's like, Overkill. And I go, okay, well, congrats, dude. You got to take that gig. You got to take it. So we were in Europe at the time, and Steve had worked a lot with Ken Mary. He goes, I'm going to have a guy send a video, and I want you to check it out. And he sent Ken playing Hammerhead. and I was like, that looks like the guy, But I didn't know that he was going to be such an asset to the band. He's like I said, a world class producer at the same time, and to have that value in your band is just crazy. But not only that, like even if I wasn't in a band with him, he's still like one of the coolest dudes I know. I'd still talk to him probably every day. Just well, you know him.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been on the show a couple times, once promoting some of, like the Fifth Angel stuff, and then obviously here. But yeah, I it's funny you mentioned that. I thought about that, like what changed, like who was the personnel, what was the personnel change, right? And I almost feel like he was kind of a catalyst for it, because when I go back to albums that the band was doing, you talked about the self-titled album, I talk about the album The Cold, you were kind of going towards what you're doing now, but it felt like, and he came in there, and all of a sudden, I never forget hearing the song "Prisoner of Time" off of End of Chaos. I remember when that song came out. I remember when the album was sent to me, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is not the same band that I've been following for 30 years. I'm like, I was blown away by that. And, again, it's not easy to release a streak of 3 great records. And I just think that he was the catalyst for that. I think you had kind of a nucleus there, but he comes in and kind of brings that. It felt like he brought that out of everybody.
Yeah. More so in this record than any of them. When he first got in the band, he felt like he had to tiptoe a little bit, I've never been came into a band that's been around for 30 years. So I don't really know how he felt, but I can only guess that, coming in, you can't just come in and start like making changes and stuff like right away. You have to gain the trust of the guys. You got to play with them. You got to get to know them over the years. And I think now he's reached his full potential with this band, and it's the pedal to the metal, and it's still there. Like this band isn't losing any. There's still tons of gas in the tank with this band. I still feel like I'm 25 years old. I know the rest of the guys do too.
Yeah.
So we might have released 3 good ones in a row, but I think there's going to be more after this. I'm sure of it. As a matter of fact, we're writing again. So.
Yeah, he mentioned some songs that were written. They just didn't fit the album. So I'm interested to hear what those might sound like down the road when you guys do start doing another record.
Well, one of them did make it on the record, it's called Beneath the Shadows. And that one, there's a couple guys in the band that are still like, what the hell with this thing? But I kind of went back to my experimental stuff. Ken called me up and said, we need something a little slower, maybe, that is driving. I go, okay. So I wrote that, and I think I was listening to a lot of Pantera at the time, because it was inspired by Walk, and but when I finished doing my recording on it and demoed it out for those guys and sent it over to Ken, Steve calls me up. He's like, what are you doing writing a ZZ Top song? Because it does kind of have that vibe to it, but a little heavier than LaGrange, I think.
So what's the reception been like for you guys? You're playing shows in Europe, you're playing all these shows everywhere. You've been around this band for the better part of, 35, 40 years. I mean, it's pretty close, right? What's the reception been like for you guys, say over these last 3 records? And has this been like the best response you've ever seen to where this band, as that compared to where you've been before?
Other than the first 2 records, absolutely. If those are the comparisons right there. We've had nothing but killer reviews about the last 3 records.
Yeah.
Of course there's going to be some haters that are going to talk a little bit of crap, but whatever, I bring it, because all that does is make people want to listen to it more, and why, they wonder why they're hating it. So, I have never listened to any of our old records like in their entirety, and the last 3 records I listened to quite a bit, actually. And one of the reasons I kind of feel like a proud father, like I'm just proud of my guys, proud of the band, we accomplished something, we put a mark in the business, and to release something like that, it's out in the world. It's something to be proud of. So
yeah. So let's talk about some of the old stuff that you've done in the past. The first couple records, it felt like this band had a lot of momentum way back in the day. And, when you go back and listen to Doomsday for the Deceiver, there really wasn't, Metallica was around. Yeah. I know you guys lost your bass player to them, but there was nothing out there that sounded like that record at the time. When I go and I go to 1986, 1985, 1987, and I go and listen to Doomsday for the Deceiver, there's nothing that sounded like that. And what was it like to put something out like that when kind of this whole thrash metal thing, maybe it only been around for 4, 5, 6 years at the most?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. I would say that because we were listening to it. Speed metal was just starting to come out. I kind of feel like we were involved in helping get that running a little bit. That record, though, if you didn't know when that came out, it would be really hard to figure out the dates if you didn't know, because it does not sound like it's something from 1986. But to me, it sounds like a bunch of kids that were hungry, like they want to play fast. They a little bit of a punk vibe, but with tuned guitars. I don't and a guy that had some real like vocal training. It wasn't just plugging into an amplifier and just rolling with everything. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I freaking love that as well. But that's not what we were doing back in the day. We were trying to write the best songs we possibly could and keep it metal and as heavy as we possibly could.
Yeah.
I had no idea that I would be sitting here talking to you almost 40 years later, talking about a record that we did. It makes me feel pretty good, and I'm proud too, really proud of that.
And I think aside from Anthrax, you guys really had one of the only thrash bands that really had a melodic sounding singer, right? Where you actually had an actual singer, because most of the bands, I'm wearing an Exodus shirt. They were singing about blood and guts and, everything else. And, there was a lot of, a lot of screaming and just a lot of talking about screaming about demons and death and all that stuff. And, Eric sang, Joey sang, right? And it's like you stood out a little bit, I think, because of that.
Yeah. And we're singing about sea monsters too, not back then, like not about death and destruction.
Right.
But, it was a little bit of a different vibe. We didn't go down the death metal thing, and AK he never really got into the aggressive vocals, the growly stuff until about 4 records ago. He started experimenting with that a little bit with his voice. Yeah. And, I guess it's just part of evolving for him. He's getting more comfortable with it, but yet he still sings, and he still sings stuff that at his age, I'm like, how are you doing that, man? Like, where's that coming from? The guy, another monster, vocally, and I think we got the best singer in metal. That's my opinion. And he drives our bus. He's the bus driver.
Well, you definitely have one of them. I one of the best singers of metal. I would agree with you. And I think as he has gotten older, I think his vocals are a lot stronger. I think his delivery is stronger. I think that, that is part of the reason these records sound as good as they do. Let's be honest. What's great about what you guys are doing now is I feel like the band's songwriting is taking more advantage of his melodic style of singing than maybe it did before.
Yeah, that's where we talk about Ken coming in, and Ken was able to refine that. Like, production is not my forte or Steve's forte or AK's, but for Ken, he can hear some different things going on there, and brings that stuff to the table. And you got to welcome that when you're writing songs. There's no egos in this band either, which is pretty incredible. If there was, I wouldn't be here. But these guys, they're all cool to hang out with. They're all, even if I wasn't in a band with them, I'd probably call them every day just because I enjoy these guys,
Yeah. So let's talk about this for a little bit. You obviously had been out of the band for a little bit, for a little while. And what prompted you to want to come back? You were out for a bit. I think in the 90s, and then you ended up coming back 12, 13 years ago. What brought you back into the band wanting to do this again?
AK called me on that and said, you know what, the band's not working out. We need the original guy back. And he goes, I'd like you to do a show with us, Bang Your Head Festival in Germany.
Yeah.
And so I agreed to that, and then I never really left again. So we just started working on new stuff, and Ugly Noise came out. That was kind of like our re-entry. Not the greatest record, but okay. I think it served its purpose at the time for re-entry, I guess. And during that time I was gone, there was obviously changes that were going on too. It was they released The Cold, which was a great record, but I don't really consider that a Flotsam record. I don't know. So coming back, it was just AK just had to make the phone call. I was ready. Our management was no longer, which was one of the big reasons why I left. Some thievery going on there that I couldn't deal with.
We've heard that story. We've heard that happening quite a bit over the years from lots of people.
To this day, the guy won't even. He still lives here in Phoenix, but he won't even come in the same room with me because.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can understand why.
It's a lot of money, man.
Yeah. Oh no, I gotcha. Out of curiosity, you mentioned something. Why don't you think The Cold is a Flotsam record? I know you just brought that up briefly.
It might be just my feelings. It's kind of Mark Simpson's a great guitar player. He pretty much wrote that record.
Mm-hmm.
But he also took my place in the band when I quit. And so that's kind of like somebody like dating my girlfriend, right?
I gotcha. Yeah, no, I gotcha. That makes sense. So from a different subject, obviously you came up with this band through the 80s. You were there through the 90s. You come back in the band. The music scene and the music business itself has changed quite a bit, there was no streaming when you left the band. You didn't have any of that stuff. Now you have a lot of things like streaming. You have, you had illegal downloading, bands, having trouble selling records, bands that have, touring costs have gone up over the last 4 years. So a lot of stuff has changed, and you guys still seem to be able to go out and play shows and do well. How has the band maybe adapted to a lot of these things that have, happened, say in the last 10, 12 years?
Being super careful, really careful and making good decisions. We didn't always make good decisions, 30 years ago. A lot of money was being thrown around by the record labels and stuff like that. Now it's just not like that anymore.
No.
We are the last people to get paid on all of it, so we want to make money and be able to keep doing it too. We got to eat as well, but everybody's got their hand in the kitty right now. And the streaming stuff, we're still trying to figure out how to get around that, because we don't get anything from streaming and stolen, I don't even mind people downloading stuff to listen to it, whatever, that's totally cool. But when you come to a show, just buy a shirt or something, make some sort of a contribution to help us out. It costs money to make records. It costs us money right out of our pocket. So
yeah, costs money.
And then there's all kinds of stuff too.
Yeah,
like the venues taking a percentage of your merch. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, the thing that really pisses me off about a lot of that and what happens when venues do that, a lot of times, let's say the shirt costs $50, right? And everybody's getting a cut of that. Maybe a label's getting a cut of that. Maybe like, I don't know. There's other, a lot of people get a cut of it. Merch guy, obviously, he's doing the work. But the crazy thing is when some of these venues do merch cuts, they don't take it off of like what's left. They take it off of the gross sale of the shirt. And then that $45 or $50 t-shirt that you're buying, a band might see $3, if that. They literally are the last one to get paid. It's like after the pandemic, musicians were the last ones to go to work, right? So it seems like the very people who are providing the source for the business to exist are the last ones getting paid.
100%. And so I got two solutions to that. The first solution is, I would be okay if at the end of the night they took a portion of the merch, but out of that portion, they paid for half of the cost. Go in on half the cost with me, but they don't. That's the first solution. Second one is I think I'm going to start 1099 in these I'll give them their percentage, but they're going to have to sign a W-2 and I'm going to 1099 them at the end of the year. And we'll see how long, if every band started doing that, we'll see how long these clubs keep taking merch.
You're talking about 1099 the clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of these discussions on the show from people in the business, and we've talked about different things that they do. It's bad enough if you got to be a traveling t-shirt salesman playing music, but then you got people taking cuts out of that. That's interesting. I like that solution. That's pretty.
I do all the merch for the band, and
okay.
So I'm like on the front line of all this, and I've never heard of anybody doing that. So that's kind of my idea. I'm going to start doing on this next on our next tour, and we'll see how they like it. I bet you we won't have any merch charges.
It's interesting. So you do the merch. Do you have your own screen printing company? Do you are you the one that goes to the companies to have the stuff made?
I'm the one. I have the stuff made. All the designs and stuff that come up with. I talk to the artist, and I'm the liaison with the band to make sure that we get that right. And then I count it, and then I'm the one that does. I set all that stuff up, and the online store. If you get a T-shirt from me, it came out of my room, one of my rooms in my house. I've got a T-shirt room, so I love doing it. I like the numbers. Before, it wasn't such a big deal when we didn't have to count everything and there would be money coming in, but now we're counting every dime because, like I said, the cost of making shirts is expensive too,
Yeah.
Like for us to order 100 shirts, it's like you have to do, it's $1 million. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would have thought that the cost of that would have kind of gone down a little bit, but it hasn't. No. At the very beginning, when everybody started touring again, it was like everybody was out of the gate all at once. Like there was no music scene for like a year of like people touring. That everybody went out of the gate. All of these screen printers and people that print merch, people that make vinyl. A lot of these, it's kind of like the drive-through at McDonald's when there's like 20 cars around the building. It just gets clogged up and there's a wait, right? And I figured that things would have gotten a little less expensive, but it seems like it's worse now because
it is
like you print merch. So let's take vinyl, for example. A lot of people that I know at record labels, they had a hard time even like getting one of these factories to even take their business. And that's the thing that was crazy. One person I know waited a year to finally get some records actually printed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it difficult. You basically got to put, it's like you put 3 or 4 singles out and that gives you time to promote the album and then wait for the merch to get done. I mean, that's why these albums take, a lot of people think, why do bands do this? I get this question. And that's why you have to wait for the merchandise to get done.
Yep. There was I think 2 years ago, there was a huge wait on one of my orders where it was almost 4 months out. Crazy. And we're trying to set up for a tour, and then and we don't even know like the tour dates yet or any of that stuff, and they want to start printing, US tour date shirts, and I'm like, I don't even know the dates yet.
Yeah.
I got a time frame, but I don't know the clubs or the venues or anything like that. So yeah, it's crazy, and the price of it, the price is insane. But the one thing about ordering through merch companies, 99.9% of the time, they're going to let you slide on the cost until your tour's done or until you can make a payment to them, so they're very cool about that.
Well, that's a bit of good news actually, because
it is.
They weren't cool about that. People would tell me horror stories like 3 years ago. I mean, when everything started ramping back up, there were horror stories, cost of buses like quadrupled, then you can't get a bus, then you can't even get a van to rent because nobody had those. And the ones they did have were sitting. So then they, of course, had mechanical issues and, all that other fun stuff going on with them. So it's tough, man. I mean, and he played in Europe too, because Europe, from what I'm told, the cost of everything there has been crazy, actually.
Yeah. Europe is a different animal for sure. It's set up differently. The costs of stuff over there is a little less because everything's so close by. You don't have to necessarily, drive 700 miles to do your next gig and pay for gas and all that sort of stuff. But and then there's a bigger market for it over there too. So you're getting more people.
Yeah.
You know, we might get 1,000 in the clubs there, where we might get 300 here. You know.
Yeah.
So, and that's one thing that I enjoy about being the merch guy is I take all those numbers and so I know how much we sold in Oklahoma or San Francisco or whatever. I'm kind of a nerd, geeky guy like that.
So do you have plans to tour in the US at all? Any future plans? I don't think I've seen any confirmed dates or anything, but do you have any plans? Maybe not to just maybe headline yourself, but maybe open for somebody. Anything along those lines coming up?
Well, that's what we're working on right now. We just signed with FM Management, so we're talking about tour packages right now, and not so much a headline US. I mean, if it comes to that, we will. But it's got to be right, you know. We don't want to be doing the meet and greets when we're charging people $150 just to sign their poster,
right.
Some bullshit like that. None of us are into that. We do our meet and greets at the end of the night. We go and talk to everybody by the merch booth. We kind of go old school on that. That's one thing that I really enjoy is talking to the fans. I want to talk to people. I want to shake their hands, and I just want to know them, you know.
Yeah.
So we're looking for probably direct support on a tour if we can make that happen for the United States. It probably won't be until 2025, though. I should tell you that.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, you got to get shirts printed up for that too. So you need to get like 3 months out to be able to do something like that. But joking aside, the album title, "I Am the Weapon." What made you all decide on that song and that title for the album?
Well, we were going to call the record Black Wings. That was the initial thought process. And then we were having trouble with that even. And we kind of got some people involved. We got the record label involved and what songs they liked. And actually our road crew are the ones that, hey man, it should be "I Am the Weapon." That sounds way better. And so we started thinking about it, and it does. It actually works with "End of Chaos," "Blood in the Water," "I Am the Weapon." I mean, it sounds like that's what it should be. So that's what we went with. Sure. And it's a great song.
I would agree with that. I'll be honest with you. So my favorite song on the album, if I were to come, I'm going to tell you what it is the last track on the album, "Black Wings." It's either that one or the first one, which is kind of weird, but that is actually my favorite song in the album. And, anybody that's listened to the album, has that song ever come up? Because I listened to the record and I remember loving the first song. The first song in the album is like the perfect opener. Going through the record, I'm digging the record. I get to this last song and then I find myself turning the volume way up, so maybe tell me a little bit about that one. And, I don't know if anyone's told you that before, but that last song, after listening to this album for a while, is my favorite one.
I guess it's like the exclamation point is what that would be. I'll give you an analogy. Larry Tatum, he's a famous Kempo karate.
Yep.
Okay. So anyways, he was doing some instructional videos and he was talking about stomping the groin, right? Like just after the guy's on the ground, stomp the groin. And then he says, re-stomp the groin. So like you're going to re-stomp the guy in the balls. So that's basically what Black Wings is. You're getting re-stomped in the groin right there.
Yeah. I took Kempo for another number of years. So it's actually really good. So if anybody looks him up, that's a great analogy. Actually, I almost started I was grinning when you brought his name up, because I did that for a number of years actually. So cool. Yeah. And it's interesting because the album's pretty varied. Now you brought up "Beneath the Shadows," which is interesting because that's a much different song than what's on, the rest of the record. But I thought having that kind of more slower mid-tempo kind of song in the middle of the album, I thought really set it off nicely as far as how it flowed.
Yeah, I wanted to do something that was very repetitive musically and let AK just kind of run with his, I guess they call it like scat lyrics or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be he's shining on the whole record, no doubt. But that song was specifically made for him to do like his improv, his if he wanted to do some sort of rap or whatever. But they ended up coming up with this giant chorus that is, after you hear the song, it's hard to stop singing it. So it is a little bit different. And like I said, some of the guys in the band are like, "What? We can't put this on there. It's different," But I think the contrast. A lot. I'm hearing a lot of interviews that's some people's favorite song. So,
yeah, I could see that. I have other journalists, people that have heard it, who have said that to me too. They kind of, you get through these first like 4 really awesome, like kick-ass heavy metal songs, and you get to the Head of the Snake, and then you get to this one, and it's kind of a nice variation right in the middle of the album. So, you brought it up earlier in the interview, and I kept thinking about that throughout this interview about how that kind of was kind of like in the middle of the record. I thought it fit really nice there. So you talk about, doing this for a long time, 40 years from now, talking about the first album. How did you end up meeting AK and some of these guys in this band to even form this band to begin with? Like, had you known him for a long time? Was it like a classic story of like, hey, we placed an ad and we found each other? I mean, how did that all start off for you for the beginning of this band?
Well, I went and saw the band. They had changed their name from Dogs to Flotsam and Jetsam. Probably, there were 3 shows before I joined that they did. One of them was with Merciful Fate, and I went and watched that show, being an audience member, and I was like, man, I want to be in that band. I want to be. And then we had a mutual friend that I guess they were talking about maybe moving on from their guitar player that wasn't going in the right direction. So my friend had ended up calling AK up, and we set up an audition with Newstead. And I had the job before we met at a music store. I had the job before we even left. And the rest is history. I wrote I Live You Die shortly after that. And that was the song that Metal Blade signed us with on the first compilation, and then decided to do the first record. So.
And then obviously Newstead ends up in Metallica. I'm interested to hear your side of things with that, because there's always been, people talk about him auditioning for that band, and, there's a whole story about how that happened. But what exactly, like, you ended up having you were label mates with Metallica actually in the second album, and you just lost your bass player, who I think is a very good player in itself. How did that, like, what happened with that? Did they just call him up? Did he go for the audition? How did that all transpire?
I knew the moment that I got the news about Cliff Burton. I knew exactly what was going to happen, just because we all knew the same people. We knew how good Jason was and how versatile he is, and his personality. He fits in with Metallica so well. I don't know if you've ever talked to those guys or if you've talked to Jason. I'm sure you have, but like he's quick, he's funny, and he was meant to be a rock star. Jason was meant to be a rock star, no doubt about it. And a lot of guys get mad. Oh yeah, well, fuck him or whatever for doing that. None of us thought like that. It was like, dude, you got to take that job. You have to do this. What can we do to help you? Well,
any of those people who say that, they would have taken that job in a heartbeat. I mean, come on. I mean, exactly. I mean, people that say stuff like that are just pretty much jealous of the fact he got the job offer to begin with. Right. Yeah. And then you had a really good, it's not like you guys had a very good record after that. No Place for Disgrace. You were on Elektra Records. You were actually on the same label as Metallica at the time. And I thought that was a great album. That was a great, like, succession to the first record. And then,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then you did the Elton John cover, which I thought was cool.
Oh, we wrecked that song. Oh my God.
But, talk about going from the first to the second album, though, because it was kind of a progression into, the band sounded a little bit different, just the songwriting standpoint, from the first album.
Yeah, and that might have been with the loss of Jason, because me and him, we had a lot of chemistry when we write together. So, and we still do, because he came back on Ugly Noise and helped out with that a little bit. That was right after my hiatus, and I had sent all my material to him, and he said he wanted to work on it with me. But yeah, so I've always had chemistry with that dude. When he left, it might have been just me and Edward, working stuff out. But after that record, there were so many years where we were Jason Newsted's old band, almost like we couldn't function without the guy. And, he was a very big part of the band, but he wasn't the whole band, we could still function. And 40 years later, we're still here, which I'm very thankful for. And
40 years later, I don't think I've heard anybody really mention that for these last 3 albums. So when I talk about overcoming nostalgia, I think that's another thing I don't hear about at all. I haven't heard people mention that in quite a long time, actually.
Yeah, the Newsted Shadow, I still get questions about every once in a while, and I don't. He's my friend, I don't mind talking about him and his, where he sits with everything. I still talk to him, and he's still a great bass player, and he's still funny as ever, and he's a lifelong friend. But I think people are just still trying to grasp on a little bit of Metallica. And now that he's not in Metallica anymore, and it's that's kind of gone. Even though I still think he's the right guy. If I can say that, you can edit that out if you want. But yeah, now I lost my train of thought, because I still get the question every once in a while. I don't mind answering.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. That's how I discovered you. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how many people did you get that follow the band because of that?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I don't think there's a problem with that. I just think that the last 3 records, I think what's a testament to what you've done recently is that it overshadows so much of all that stuff, because you don't hear as many reviewers saying that. You don't hear them referencing the first 2 albums all the time. I'm referencing them and bringing it up because it's an observation, but I think that is how strong your new albums are. In all seriousness, I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years, and I can tell you, I have followed the band for a long time, and I've never heard, very rarely have I ever heard a band this late in their career sound as good as you guys do. I mean, I've told Ken that. So a couple more questions before we get done here. We talked about No Place for Disgrace. You did re-record that album. Just out of curiosity, why did you decide to maybe re-record the record instead of maybe remixing it?
Remixing it was not an option, because I don't even know where the master tapes are at.
Okay.
I wanted to do a little justice, and I would never, ever, ever recommend re-recording a classic record that your band has done. If you want to shoot yourself in the foot, that is the quickest way to do it.
Yeah.
We dodged a bullet on that one, because a lot of the fans knew we were doing it, and they were like, no, no, no. But when it finally came out, they were okay with it. We upgraded the production a little bit on it to kind of enhance the guitars a little bit. The guitars, to me, as a guitar player, are a little bit washy. Some of the mixed stuff wasn't quite correct. We wanted to correct that, but we probably shouldn't have done that.
I'm always 50-50 on whether I either like when people do that, and whether I like it better than the original record. There's a couple bands that I can tell you, in my opinion, that the re-recorded stuff I think sounds better than the old one. For me, I actually liked the re-recording. I didn't like it better than the original album, but this falls under the category of, listening to this, they did a pretty good job on it. I mean, there are bands that have re-recorded records where I'm like, man, this sounds better than the first album. I mean, that album that they just redid. So, I get it. It's dangerous territory. And the thing is, people will always get like mad about that kind of stuff. To me, I sort of get where you're coming from as a musician, because you're like, man, with updated technology, what could I make this sound like? Mm-hmm. That always is something that comes up with people, and some people do a really good job. Some people, maybe folks don't like it as much as the original, but at least they did a pretty good job on it. And that's kind of where I put that. I don't get mad at bands for stuff like that, because I can go back to stuff I've done and be like, man, I wish I could re-record that. or
Yeah,
remix it.
you can upgrade the sound and the sonic quality of it, but the one thing that uh, you can't upgrade is the vibe and the anger and the energy that that first one produced. Like
Correct.
if you can create that, and that's where you lose people, and that's really the heart of what metal is right there. That whole vibe doesn't have to sound great. It just has to present that vibe to people where, the energy and some of the there's been some pretty bad sounding records that are some of my favorite records.
Yeah. I can think of a few of those, especially stuff that came out 30, 40 years ago. So I mean,
Yeah.
I get it, but the interesting part too is that the band persevered through the 90s as well, which was kind of a very dark time for this kind of music, and still put some quality records out. I mean, for you guys, how badly did it affect? Everybody has a different story of how it affected them. But you still did have some bands kind of going through it. We mentioned Overkill earlier in the show about your former drummer going there, and like you had Pantera, was kind of at their height. How did the '90s really affect you guys?
I think we missed the mark on some of our songwriting. We were trying to we're on a major label. I think we had the mindset like we got to write like we're on a major label instead of staying true to, our first record, the speed metal stuff, and so we did a lot of experimentation with like heavy. It was heavy metal for sure, but it necessarily wasn't like speed metal or thrash metal on some of that
Right.
stuff. And when you start toying around with that. Some of the metal fans don't like that. They like to stay in the box of their whatever genre they're in, and whatever turned them on about your band. They don't want you changing that stuff, and they're very protective of it, which is killer. I love to have fans like that because they will always be your fans, even if they dislike something that you release. They're very, very loyal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I was listening to Quattro and High and Drift throughout the '90s and liked those records. So that's why I asked if it was something that really had a major effect on you. But I thought those albums actually were pretty. There were some pretty cool songs. Like I can go back and listen to Drift and listen to a song like Empty Air, and I'm like, I like that whole record. I think that whole album is actually very good. And it's sad because I think that record should have been bigger than what it was.
Yeah, we had some expectations on that, and I think that was the record label that was giving that to us because they're the ones that were coming in. We actually had some producers coming in and helping out with that, which was really weird for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed some of the arrangements on the songs because of the producers. That might have been some of it, but overall, it had the vibe and the energy, which I'm okay with. Even if the songs aren't exactly what I wanted, the vibe and the energy's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Now Quattro had. I wrote a song in there, "Waiting Through the Darkness," and that was that was kind of our entry into alternative metal. I think it would be because we've never played anything like that. It's slowed down. It's very dissonant and dark.
Yep.
And it ended up being in regular rotation on MTV. Which brought the band to a different level.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a very good. That's a very good song, by the way. It's actually one of my favorite songs in the album.
Yeah, it just kind of hit or miss, and then we even had a song on that record that Chris Cornell wrote the lyrics to, which nothing ever happened with that, even though his name was attached to it.
Yeah,
you would think one of the best singers in metal that would help with getting that out there, but it's hit or miss. The business is being in the right time at the right place and releasing the right material.
Absolutely. Well, hey, you know what, Michael? I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your insight, appreciate your time, and most of all, I appreciate the music you've put out. I really honestly believe, and I've told Ken this about 1,000 times on Facebook and tagged him in a bunch of stuff. I really honestly believe, as somebody that likes this band, these last 3 records, the best stuff you guys have ever done. I mean, just hands down. It's like you just kind of all met each other, gelled really well together, and you've written some fantastic songs. And I can't really express enough just how good this record is.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. And I'll let the guys know you said that. We're all super proud of it, and the last 3 records, and Flotsam's on a new trajectory, moving to new higher platforms right now, and all because of guys like you that listen to it and put it out there and are super supportive. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So, hey, thanks for coming on. And again, best of luck to everything. I really think you guys, 40 years after, pretty much 40 years after the first album comes out, or close to it, I think you guys are hitting a high point. Crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, our golden years.